Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fort Wayne Local Podcast. I'm your host, Jake McAfee. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm really excited. Today, we're joined by the mayor of Fort Wayne, Mayor Tom Henry. So, Mayor Henry, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Jake. Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely. And so, quick background before we jump in. He's currently serving his fourth term as the mayor. Before that, he was on city council from 1983 to 2003. He's one of 17 children, which I just confirmed is accurate. Your poor parents. He married his wife Cindy in 1975. He now has 2 adult children and 4 grandchildren. He graduated from Central Catholic in 1970 and got his bachelor's and MBA from St. Francis. He's also an Army veteran, so thank you for your service. And he's a member of the Most Precious Blood Church. So
Right.
about as Fort Wayne as it comes with that bio there. So there's so many things we could talk about. There's obviously, with your job, there's so many different avenues we could go. Today, we're going to focus mostly on economic development and the city's role in economic development. So to get it started, you're always obviously concerned with Fort Wayne's present as well as its future, and that's a balance. So how did economic development get on your radar? Were you looking at other cities as a model? Did you read literature, or where did that start?
Well, Jake, when I first became mayor back in 2008, if you remember correctly, we were just getting into a recession at that time. And our city, our downtown in particular, was a pretty dormant environment. There were a lot of empty storefronts. There wasn't much activity. And I realized early on that those cities throughout the country that I had studied and gone to see what they were doing, most of them had downtowns that were very vibrant, very exciting, very welcoming. And I thought, until we put downtown Fort Wayne in that position, I doubt if too many employers are going to look at our city seriously. I mean, what employer is going to move into a city that has nothing downtown, which in many cases is their center of commerce? That's where your banks are, that's where your government offices are, that's where your lawyers are. So you had to have something welcoming them downtown. We didn't have much. So especially my first 4 years, I spent a lot of time, a lot of effort to partner with organizations to bring them downtown, to try to turn that whole image of our downtown around. And that moved from my first 4 years into actually my second 4 years. But I think we've seen the result, excuse me, of the effort that was made to try to make our downtown a little more vibrant, a little more, as I said, welcoming to those who come into our city. Again, I think it's paid off. We have been very fortunate to have a number of employers over the past 12, 13 years move into our city, and our downtown has really turned itself around. Now we do have a number of hospitality offerings. Obviously, we have a great sporting facility in Parkview Field. Now we're looking at putting a soccer stadium downtown. So more and more people are taking a real interest in our downtown area. And as a result, I think our city is gaining popularity, not only regionally, but even throughout the country. We keep winning more and more awards for our community. So a lot of the risk that was taken, 10, 12 years ago, I think is beginning to pay off.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, I'm a real estate agent and I run a lot of ads and whatnot. And I've actually talked to people just in the last couple of weeks from LA, San Francisco, Tucson. There's a lot of interest coming from the West Coast and other areas as well, but especially the West Coast, I've noticed. So I think it is paying off. And so it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you kind of came into office with this mindset. This wasn't something you kind of discovered while in office. It was, if I get this position, these are going to be my goals.
Correct.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I was on city council 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I got off for 4 years, but even though I wasn't in an elected position from 2004 to 2008, I never really left my interest in public service and obviously our city. So I began to see the deterioration of downtown as far as a place where people would want to go and spend time. So when I did become mayor, that was one of the first things on my agenda, was to get together people to discuss partnerships and other types of investment in our downtown to bring people to the core of our city.
Okay. And what would you say, obviously you can't, especially in your position, you can't please everyone. And I try to be as broad and open-minded as I can. And I see people say, why are we spending tax dollars? Um, One, when other businesses are going to benefit, but also instead of spending, why not just incentivize businesses to come by tax incentives or deferred taxes or something like that?
Well, Jake, more and more companies are requesting a partnership arrangement. That doesn't preclude us from offering other types of incentives, but by us putting some skin in the game, these companies know now that we're very serious. We want to be a partner with them. Plus, we live in a very competitive environment now. Even though we're the largest city in about a 100-mile radius, we still compete with the largest cities. Years ago, we might have competed with some of the smaller communities in and around Indiana. And I'm talking about Anderson, Indiana, maybe, or some of the communities that are a little bit larger than us. But because of the emphasis now on city involvement and partnerships, now we're competing with cities like Cincinnati and Cleveland and Toledo, to some extent even Chicago. So we're in the big leagues now. We've made the investment, we've taken the risk to compete for some of these large employers. And a good example is the one who just announced recently they were coming to Fort Wayne, and that was Amazon. Amazon is big enough, they can go anywhere in the country, but we worked very hard to get them to come to Fort Wayne. And now out at the airport, they're building a 650,000 square foot facility, and they're going to hire 1,000 employees. I mean, that's a huge investment on their part, and obviously quite a statement for Fort Wayne that we were willing and able to sit down and partner with them. But in partnering, it does take financial investment. Jake, I think if you were to talk to any mayor of any city, our size or bigger, even smaller for that matter, come to think of it, everyone is going to say, if a city takes seriously their challenge to be a competitive community, then it's going to take access to capital. Our revenue stream comes from taxes. We as a society, as an American community, chose taxation as one of the areas that would generate revenue for communities. So much of the money that we get to sit down and partner with companies like Amazon or the Sweetwater or Ash Brokerage, some of these companies that have grown in Fort Wayne, it's been as a result of us being able to sit down across the table and put together a partnering environment. Now, sometimes that calls for us to build a parking garage for them. That's our contribution. Well, parking garages are not cheap. They run $20,000 to $25,000 a space. And if you want 1,000 spaces, you're talking $20 to $25 million. So if we're going to build that, then I want them to build $100 million facility in exchange, or a 75 million. That way it's 3 to 1. But those kinds of discussions can only take place if I have the ability to access capital necessary to be able to sit down and negotiate aggressively. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else. So yes, we have to use taxes as our contribution to these negotiations, but that's really the only revenue stream that we have are property taxes, food and beverage taxes, income taxes, and so on.
Okay. And so it sounds like it's pretty much that's just the market. the market is that you have to do it, or else, Columbus is right there, South Bend is up and coming.
That's exactly right. It's driven by competition. And if
Okay.
we're not in the position to compete aggressively and productively, then we're out of the game.
Okay. And so what were the risks that you saw them? And I think you might have just answered this. The risk of spending the money is obvious. What did you see as the risks of not taking these bold steps? Like, what did you
Well,
project might
uh,
happen?
this, you're you're right. If we don't stay ahead of the game, then we fall behind. And that's exactly what happened to us back in 2004 to 2008. If you remember correctly, International Harvester packed, packed up and moved. We competed against Springfield, Ohio, and we lost. When Lincoln National Life decided to move its corporate offices, we competed with Pennsylvania, and we lost. Uh, the uh, uh, the the plant that's now down by Anderson. Um, oh shoot, I can't remember. But we were competing with another company out at the airport, and we competed against Madison County, and we lost. So this is what happens. You end up losing thousands of jobs if you cannot position yourself aggressively. Uh, so that's what happened. Or they don't come here at all. We've unfortunately lost against some other cities that where we know a company was looking around, and we didn't get the opportunity to really sit down and aggressively compete because our competition came out strong right out of the chute. Uh, Now we learned our lesson over the years, so now we position ourselves, and we've already proven ourselves from a quality of life perspective in Fort Wayne to a quality of place. So we've already developed some real tools to take to the marketplace. So when my economic development staff sits down with a company that's considering Fort Wayne as an initial investment or considering whether or not they want to grow, and a good example is Sweetwater. Chuck Surak and his company, last year they did $1 billion in sales. Nobody in Fort Wayne does $1 billion in sales, but he did. And he is large enough now where he can go anywhere, not only in the country, but if he wanted to, anywhere in the world. He decided to stay here. We sat down with Chuck and we said to him essentially, what would it take to keep you here? Now, the good news is this is Chuck's home. So that in and of itself gave us an advantage. But we were able to sit down and continue to provide him some additional incentives to stay here. Well, if we don't have that ability, then I don't blame companies for getting up and moving if another community can offer them incentives to go there. But again, right now, over the past 10 years in particular, we've been able to put those packages together in a very aggressive, progressive fashion, and it's impressed companies.
Okay, I think that transitions perfectly into electric work. So that's
Oh,
an
sure.
exciting project. It's also
Yes.
very polarizing.
Yep. Agree.
I lived in Orlando for 12 years, Orlando, Florida. And so I saw the benefits of parts of, areas that were run down. I saw them be redeveloped
Uh-huh.
and what resulted from that. So I feel like I kind of have a unique perspective. My
Uh-huh.
mother-in-law does economic development in Durham, so I've picked her brain a lot.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people maybe haven't seen something like that happen with their own two eyes. And I think a big part of the resistance is that. But before we get into, kind of where we're at, let's go back. What were you thinking, or what was going on when this project first got presented to you? Like, how did this come on your radar?
Well, General Electric started talking to us, oh my gosh, probably 5 or 6 years ago, when they made the decision that the few hundred employees that they had left here were going to be moved elsewhere. And the physical plant itself, for all intents and purposes, was going to close down operationally. There would be no more GE employees there. They met with myself as well as some of my staff and Greater Fort Wayne and some others, and said, we've got a million square feet of space, and we will sell it to you at a reasonable price, but GE is going to be gone. And if you want us to tear down some buildings as a part of this effort, we'd be willing to do that. But we'll make you an attractive offering as far as purchase. Well, at that time, we did have Greater Fort Wayne was very aggressive in wanting to do something, and we did ultimately position ourselves for some developers to come forward, purchase the buildings, make some decisions to move that thing forward, that campus forward. The problem that we had from the very beginning is that it is a huge campus, and there are 13, 14, 15 buildings on that campus. So the undertaking was going to be enormous. And the original price to turn those buildings around and try to make them into something that would be attractive as far as housing or retail or education or whatever, we found out was going to take somewhere between 250 and $300 million. Well, that's a huge investment for a city our size. We were used to doing 10 million, 20 million, and all of a sudden it's 300 million. So obviously there were a lot of us who stepped back and said, if we're going to invest this kind of money, even if it's over a 20-year period, it's still taxpayers' dollars. And we've got to do proper due diligence to make sure that whatever ultimately is decided should go here will be something that will benefit our city, not only immediately, but long term. And that was probably, Jake, the one area that was of most concern to the Redevelopment Commission and to the CIB and to my staff was the sustainability. You know, it's one thing to go out and build a building or to refurbish a building. It's something else to make sure that that investment will serve us long term. We don't want to build something and in 5 years have it go belly up. And I know you have seen, and I have seen situations where that has incurred, where great intentions were begun, and it's exciting, but you got to make sure that it's there for the long run. And that was probably the area that was of most concern to all of us. Was we knew the developers and we knew the construction companies and others had the ability to put it together initially, but would it serve the time necessary to really make it something that was sustainable? But ultimately, after several years of negotiation and several years of modifying the business plan and so on, ultimately the Redevelopment Commission, thanks to some additional investors who stepped forward, it raised their comfort level to the point where they recommended that we move forward, and I signed off on it.
Okay. And was there any points where you thought this was in doubt? Was it last fall when the deal fell apart? Was that fall?
Last August is when the
August?
redevelopment turned it down.
That's right.
Because they were not comfortable with the risk factor. They were not comfortable with at least the knowledge base that they had at the time, whether there were going to be enough investors, whether enough banks were going to come forward to lend the money necessary, and so on. So I did not find fault with that. Again, we're talking as far as the city of Fort Wayne was concerned, about $65 million worth of taxpayers' dollars. And by the time we pay off that loan or that bond, it was probably going to be twice that over the next 20, 25 years. So they wanted to make sure, again, that this was going to be a sustainable investment that would serve the test of time. So when they turned it down, they did not turn it down in the sense that it was not doable. They turned it down because they did not think that there was enough financial strength to have it go forward in its current condition. Well, once people like Tim Ash stepped forward and said, hey, I'll put money into it, the model group, the group that did the landing, they stepped up and said, hey, we'll be a partner in this. Now, all of a sudden, the comfort level was raised significantly, and redevelopment said, okay, now we have something that we think is good. And they sent that forward then.
Okay, so that came down to financing because there's so many rumors flying around about that, and I was very curious of what happened there
That
and
was
why the
strictly
additional.
strictly financing. Um,
Okay,
Again, you're talking your dollars, my dollars, and quite frankly, our children's dollars, and maybe even into our grandchildren's investment. So we didn't want them paying for something that was not going to be of value to them. And so I think it was a wise decision. And I know they took a lot of criticism. I took a lot of criticism, but I don't mind that if you know ultimately that you're moving the thing in the right direction.
sure. I got to be honest. I was a little critical. I feel bad at the time. It was a knee jerk reaction, but I don't want to lie to you. I was a little critical at that moment, but I'm still a supporter. So, how I think with some people, their thing is okay, they'll evaluate what the property would generate, like in a traditional commercial sense, and they're saying we're way overpaying for this thing. So, how do you guys factor in? I guess without getting too technical, but how do you factor in like the surrounding area is going to get better, that you're going to start retaining talent or bringing businesses, like how does that fit into the puzzle?
Well, the first, I think, sign of some real potential strength for that campus was the fact Do It Best decided to move there. Do It Best current investment in the right outside of New Haven, they're kind of in between Fort Wayne and New Haven. Their current campus is really old, and it needs a tremendous amount of investment, and they know that. So they decided rather than put that in this old building, let's take a look at possibly relocating. Well, Do It Best is one of the largest companies in Indiana because of their investment throughout the world. They're a significant company, and again, they were in a position where they could go anywhere they wanted to. But Fort Wayne is their home. This is where they started, and they wanted to give us first shot. Well, Electric Works stepped up and said, "We've got all of this campus space. Why don't we sit down and negotiate with you and try to put a deal together?" Which they did. And I was not a part of that. That was between the developers and Do It Best. But Do It Best ultimately said, "Okay, we'll make that our new home." Well, once they did that, I think a lot of other companies said, "Well, if it's good enough for Do It Best, then it's probably good enough for us." So more and more companies began to come forward and sign memos of understanding or initial development agreements and so on. So now we have a pretty good group of companies that are willing to step up as that campus gets developed. And that includes even Fort Wayne Community Schools. They want to expand their STEAM offerings. Uh, well, in an environment like that now, with all these different companies coming forward, it's going to provide Fort Wayne Community Schools with the foundation to research some job opportunities and educational opportunities in those areas. So I think it's beginning to take off. And obviously, as it matures and as it grows in popularity, you'll get more and more companies. And I think what you said a few minutes ago was true. As that campus develops and becomes more and more attractive, that whole neighborhood should begin to raise up as well, particularly the small businesses on Broadway and Fairfield,
Mhm.
uh, because all of these employees who are going to be working there are going to need places to eat. They're going to need places for leisure time and so on. So I think it could be a real positive investment for that part of town.
So you're looking bigger picture than like maybe a traditional investor would say, I'll pay X because it'll generate Y. You're saying we're paying maybe a little bit more than what that person thinks, but there's a much bigger play at hand. Like,
We have to take a look at that as mayor and my administrative staff, my cabinet. We have to take a look at the bigger picture because what the decisions that we're making today is not only for you and me, but it's for the next generation. Uh, that's our job, is to try to exercise some vision uh, so that our children, our children's children, have some type of good foundation to work off of.
okay. And for those who don't know, that project is under construction right now. But for the sake of time, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to shift to the food and beverage tax, which does kind of tie into all these things that we're
Uh-huh.
talking about. So the recent hubbub, if you will, was the food and beverage tax. I
Right.
interviewed James Kahn, Jimmy Schindler, so restaurant owners on both sides,
Uh-huh.
and it was definitely very polarizing.
Yes.
I wanted to first give you some or an opportunity to clear up maybe misconceptions, or just kind of say what you were thinking
Sure.
with that line of with that plan?
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, cities only have so many revenue streams that they can rely on to help move the city forward, especially from an economic development perspective. They give us access to a limited amount of income tax, and we do have some of that right now. In fact, it was a little bit of income tax that we received from you and others that developed Promenade Park and will help us go into phase 2 and phase 3. Most of that's being paid for by a little percentage of your income tax. So that was one area that we could take a look at. Well, under the circumstances with the pandemic and so on, the staff and I said, no, that's probably not the way to go right now. And we have a little bit of the food and beverage tax, which was something that state gave us actually 30 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long, but about 30 years ago, they said, you know, if you want to add a penny onto $1 at your with food and beverage, restaurants and bars and so on, you can use that penny for economic development in your community. We're going to set up a separate board, and that board is called the Capital Improvement Board, or the CIB. They get that money. It doesn't come to the city of Fort Wayne or the Allen County directly. It goes into that board who oversees the investments from an economic development perspective. And it has to be for capital expenses. It can't be for operating. So it has to be for buildings and so on. And a lot of times they'll do that again in a partnership arrangement, so that wherever it goes, if it goes into some type of private development, a good example is the Ash Building. Okay, we put some money into the parking garage, but in exchange, Tim Ash and his company built the building. So we do some things like that. And some of it goes into public projects like Promenade Park. But anyway, so that's the income tax and the food and beverage. Those really anymore are about the only two sources of revenue that we have besides a set property tax, which is frozen. So those are our revenue streams. Well, we've had conversations with some other companies that want to come to Fort Wayne and they want to partner. Well, I look at our current revenue stream, and again, the food and beverage, even though we get a penny, and that converts to about $6 million a year, that's gone into a lot of these investments that I just talked to you about, and some of the others that we have on the books, like the new groundbreaking that we did next to Promenade Park, the new mixed use development. So a lot of that money is going to all these projects, and some of it goes to the Coliseum, and some of it goes to the Grand Wayne Center. Well, all of that's pretty well invested for the next at least 5 or 6 years before some of those loans get paid off. In the meantime, because of the popularity of Fort Wayne, we've got companies that want to come in and want to partner. Well, I'm running out of money. I just don't have access to the kind of capital that I need to be competitive. So I went back to the legislature and I said, you know, you give us 1 penny now. So when Jake goes out and eats, he pays an extra penny on $1. It's not a restaurant tax. A lot of people think, oh, the restaurants, they can't afford it. The restaurants don't pay it. You pay it to the restaurant, and then the restaurant gives it to the state, and then the state gives it back to us, back to the CIB. So I think that's a misnomer, thinking that the bars and the restaurants are being charged a penny. They're not. They're a pass-through. Mm-hmm. The customer pays it, it goes to the restaurant, that goes to the CIB. So the restaurants aren't being taxed, and I think that was a lot of the misinformation that was going out there. The restaurants can't afford to pay it. Well, the restaurants aren't paying it. Now, some restaurants say, well, that's going to take away business from it if you have to pay an extra penny. Well, first of all, Jake, you're talking 10 cents on a $10 purchase. Mm-hmm. Okay. On a $100 purchase, you're talking $1. So it's not a significant amount of money. I don't want to say that every penny doesn't count.
No, I get what you're saying.
But it's not a lot of money if you're talking about multi-million-dollar investments in our community. Mm-hmm. Now, some restaurants are saying, geez, it's going to take away business. Now, let's think about that for a second. If I can take the money that's paid through food and beverage, and I can help a company bring another 400 or 500 or 600 jobs to the city,
Hmm.
those employees are going to be eating out, which gives more business to the restaurants. And that's the whole idea, is to invest some money up front to get more money coming in from the back end. Now, to give you an example, when we first started the food and beverage tax 30 years ago of 1 penny, that first year we generated a little over $1.5 million in food and beverage tax.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, as I mentioned, it's up to 6 million. That only occurred because more business came in to support the restaurant. So it's an investment. It's not an expense. What we're trying to do is to take a penny here and turn it in ultimately to hundreds of dollars in investment. So and I'm glad you asked me that, because there is a lot of misunderstanding out there as to what we're talking about.
And so I think another question would be, why restaurants though? Like, why not, you mentioned Sweetwater. If I'm playing devil's advocate, why not Sweetwater, who just had a record year? Like, why the
Right.
restaurants?
Well, Chuck already pays a tremendous amount of property tax because he is a for-profit company, and he employs, over 1,000 employees, and they all pay payroll tax and so on. So he has an initial investment, and all of that money that helped build that company was his money. So they already invest a tremendous amount. And again, the food and beverage tax is what they call a user fee. In other words, if you don't go out to eat tonight in a restaurant, you don't pay it.
Hmm.
You only pay it when you use it. Uh, so it's not a regressive tax where I got to pay it no matter what.
Hmm.
No, it's a user fee. So if you don't go out and eat, or you don't go to a bar and have a drink, you don't pay it. Uh, but if you do, then you help support the economic development of our city, which in return will give that restaurant and that bar more business. Uh, but again, that was an area that our state legislature thought was a good user fee to incorporate, as I mentioned 30 years ago. Now, most cities in Fort Wayne have a penny already, or a lot of them do. Indianapolis has 2 cents because they wanted to build, in that particular case, they wanted to build Lucas Oil uh,
Hmm.
Stadium, which cost like $1 billion to build. So they partnered and built that. Uh, and we were asking for a second cent for us. We figured if Indianapolis can get 2 cents for their economic development foundation, then we deserve 2 cents as well, because we're better than Indianapolis. Uh, and a lot of other pennies, or excuse me, a lot of other cities were asking for their first penny. Uh, so it's just a way of helping fund the economic development initiatives of a city.
Okay. So thank you for being willing to have that conversation.
Sure.
A lot of people have been talking about that. So shifting to the riverfront project.
Uh-huh.
So phases 1, 2, and 3, just to make sure I have them correct. Phase 1 was Promenade Park.
Correct.
Phase 2 is going to have a focus on private investment, restaurants, boutique hotels, but you're looking to spur private money.
Correct.
Phase 3 is going to be recreation based, like sledding, basketball courts, lawn
Correct.
areas. Is that the correct overview of what's
That's
going on?
pretty close. Yeah, you pretty much got that one on spot on. And phase 1 is finished. That was Promenade Park. Excuse me. Phase 2 is now kind of semi underway. We haven't put all of the financing package together from the city side or from the public side, but the private development has already started. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we did break ground
Mhm.
on Riverfront at Promenade, and that's the new mixed-use development. That's private investment. He's putting in about $90 million to build that, but it's going to be apartments, it's going to be townhomes. The whole first floor is going to be retail for additional coffee shops and restaurants right across the street from Promenade Park. Uh, so they're going to be putting a lot of investment there as their contribution toward the beginning of phase 2. But that's only part of it. We're also going to be going west towards Van Buren. So
Mhm.
the west of the old Wells Street Bridge. Right now, everything is east. Now we're
Mhm.
going to be going west, and we're going to be securing some property ourselves to continue the public investment, but we're also going to be sending out RFPs for, or excuse me, requests for proposals from companies to take a look at partnering with us as we move towards Van Buren. And phase three then will take us even further to the west, but mostly to the east down to the confluence. And that's where we're going to have a lot of the recreational activities. Yeah.
Okay. So is this part of do you have like a big overhead view of okay, like Electric Works is going to, bring employers and employees, people working on site. This is going to kind of be a recreational live work play. You've got the
Right.
stadium for
Correct.
sports. Is this do you have like a big overview and then these are
Yeah,
all different
yeah,
pieces
we
that'll
do have a downtown plan,
Okay.
but it's pretty fluid. Uh,
Yeah.
we for instance, Barrett and Stokely, who are building the mixed use development that I just talked about, uh, 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't even know they existed. They
Mhm.
came to us and said, "We really love the momentum of Fort Wayne. We like what Fort Wayne is doing, and we know you're going to be building uh, phase one, two, and three of Riverfront. We'd like to be a part of it." Now, the same company likes Fort Wayne so much that they're going to build another one on the parking lot of Club Soda. Same company. And that one's going to be, I think, about a 60 or $70 million investment. Pretty much the same type of design. They're going to have retail, they're going to have townhomes and apartments from Superior all the way to Headwaters Park. So these are two huge developments, collectively about 150 or $60 million that this company is putting in for an investment in Fort Wayne. So our original downtown plan all of a sudden got changed
Yeah.
because they stepped up. So yeah, we do have an overall plan, but it's very fluid.
Gotcha. Okay. And just for people who don't know, when I was in college, we used to go to Columbia Street, and then I had friends that lived over like on I think Second Street maybe, and we would walk through there, and it looks a
Right?
lot different now. I'll say that
Yeah, yeah, it certainly does.
it looks a lot different. So, like I said, I want to keep it moving for the sake of your time. So, soccer stadium. That's you just talked about it in the state of the
Right.
city. Um, that's going to have an entertainment venue, a field house, hotel, and restaurants. Where does this project currently stand?
Well, right now, the soccer stadium is the first phase of that particular development. We have a couple of different developers, but DeMarcus Beasley and those individuals, those citizens who don't know DeMarcus, he is a world-renowned soccer player. He happens to be from Fort Wayne, but he has won several world championships. He's very, very popular in the soccer area, the soccer field. But he loves Fort Wayne. Again, this is his home. And he knows the popularity of soccer is growing significantly in the city of Fort Wayne. So he wants to bring in a professional soccer team and build, he and some others, build a stadium for that soccer team. And they're affiliated with USL, United Soccer. Uh, so they looked around and they decided that North River would be a great place to have it because it's right at the entrance into downtown. Plus, it's accessible from downtown simply by walking over the Martin Luther King Bridge.
Mhm.
Uh, so they felt logistically that it was a great place to have the soccer stadium. Well, another developer heard about that and decided that they would like to kind of partner with DeMarcus and build an event center so they can offer some musical offerings in a smaller venue than the Coliseum, but bigger than the embassy. So I think they're looking around 5,000 people. But they also want to build a hotel because once the soccer stadium is built, people are going to be coming in from all over. They
Mhm.
need a place to stay. And
Sure.
so they're looking at a hotel and a restaurant. So I think once one gets going, others it'll be kind of like a domino effect. And this is going to take several years. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take at least 2 years to build the soccer stadium. I do have a meeting with DeMarcus and his group in a couple weeks, and we're going to be then sitting down and looking at blueprints and the like. Uh, but again, here's a situation where they may very well step up and say, okay, we're going to put so many $1 million into this soccer stadium. What's the city? What are you guys bringing to the table?
Hmm.
And I don't know what all they're going to ask for. It may be a parking garage or
Hmm.
something else. Well, this is where access to capital comes in. If I don't have the money, then it's hard for me to partner. So it all kind of fits together.
Sure. This is great. So, are there any other plans for North River? Because that was kind of the first I'd heard anything about North River. Is there like long-term plans with it as
Well,
well?
again, it's 30 or 40 acres, and of course the stadium, and then you've got the event center, and then you've got a hotel, and then you've got a restaurant. That's going to take up a lot of that. But I mentioned the developer that is building the Promenade Park, Riverfront Promenade, and the headwaters one at Club Soda. Well, when he heard about DeMarcus's plans and dreams for, he's also stepped up and said, I may want to put some additional housing in that area.
Okay.
So, those who, for instance, if there's some local uh, men who are going to be on this soccer team, uh, they could live in these apartments,
Yeah.
and their soccer stadium is right there. So I think there's all kinds of possibilities. Some others said, Spring Street, if you're familiar with that area,
Hmm.
Spring Street dead ends at Well Street. And another developer said, Mayor, can we sit down and talk about extending Spring Street all the way through and connecting it with the soccer stadium and so on? That way you can go straight. So all of this begins
Sure.
to generate some additional ideas and thoughts, which is great. That's how cities grow.
That's great. And it's kind of cool seeing it go from south to now we're talking North River and it's kind of bleeding
Exactly.
the '08, the
Right.
'05, that
You're,
type of
you're
area.
exactly right.
That's great. Where does, there was a basketball stadium that was proposed a while back. Where does that stand?
The arena downtown, we were talking about at one time putting an arena down in the area that we refer to as Restaurant Row, where those 3 or 4 fast food restaurants are. Well,
Hmm.
the CIB did buy that property. Uh, I don't think right now they have anything planned for it. An arena was looked at, but it was found to be quite frank, a little too expensive. Uh,
Gotcha.
so I think they're going to keep everything is where it's at now, with the understanding that if things get back to normal again, I don't know what normal means anymore, but if it gets back to some resemblance of what we used to have, the Grand Wayne Center had some plans to grow its facility to include a new ballroom and so on. Well, if they do, right now, Jake, they're kind of landlocked.
Yeah.
Uh, so they might want to go across the street to Restaurant Row and build an extension of the Grand Wayne Center. And again, that's just
Yeah. Yeah.
thinking. It's pretty much in the embryonic stages right now, but that's a possibility. And we do, or CIB does own that property now, so that's a possibility. But as far as an arena anywhere around there, to my knowledge, it's it's not an issue.
Okay. And one last topic, and then we'll ask you one final question that we ask everyone. But
Sure.
how do you personally deal with the pressure? I mean, you're making bold decisions with millions of dollars. No matter what you pick, half the people are going to love it, half the people are going to hate it. How do you deal with this type of pressure?
Well, most of the time, it is hard on families when if you have a significant other or you're married and have children. A lot of times they take it more personally than you do. You have to have a thick skin in
Hmm.
this business. But one of the things I learned early on was most of the time, don't take it personally.
Hmm.
Uh, if someone objects to a decision that I've made, it's not that they hate me.
Hmm.
Uh, they don't like the decision that I made. So you just have to keep that in mind that so many of our decisions deal with specific issues. Again, going back to the food and beverage tax, my interpretation, my cabinet's interpretation was that was the best way to move forward. Obviously, city council and others thought, no, that's not the best way to go, at least at this time. Now, a year from now, that may change. Uh,
Hmm.
but right now, we were at odds. But it's the state legislature didn't say no. Uh, Senator Holden didn't say no to me personally. It was no to, it's probably not the best time to go forward with food and beverage. And I understand that. So if there's any advice I can give to anybody in the in public service, is more times than not, it has nothing to do with you personally. It's the decision that you made uh, in reference to a particular issue or whatever. Now, sometimes it might get personal, but
I've heard some personal stuff.
most of the time it does.
Okay. And so what do you want your legacy to be here in Fort Wayne? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh gosh. I really don't think about that much. Fort Wayne is the home to the Henry family. You mentioned my siblings earlier. The vast majority of them live here. I have about 150 nephews and nieces, and most of them call Fort Wayne home. Uh, it's not so much a legacy that I want to leave as much as it is trying to pass on to the next generation uh, the kind of environment that was left to us. I think my parents and their peers, I think, did a heck of a job in putting Fort Wayne on a solid foundation. Obviously, we've had our ups and downs as a community, but if all of us uh, can pass on to the next generation a city worth accepting and propelling forward, uh, that's all I want.
That's great. And then the last thing we ask everyone, what's your favorite thing about living in Fort Wayne?
Oh my gosh. Um, I a lot of people say this, but it's really true. It's the people.
Hmm.
In many ways, we're a big small town, and we are a big town. A lot of people don't realize that we're the 78th largest city in the country. Uh, they know we're the second largest city in Indiana, but to realize we're in the top 100 of the entire country. And we have the ability to be a snobbish community if we wanted to be. But as I talk to citizens and citizens that move into the community that I have a chance to talk to, uh, they cannot get over how much our community uh, gels around each other and takes care of one another. And I talked to a company that moved into town, and he said that was one of the reasons that they made the decision to come here, was that we as a community take care of one another. But what a powerful statement. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was part of the reason I came back from Orlando. I felt, and no disrespect, I have a lot of friends there, but I felt like Orlando is a more transactional place where I feel like here it's like if I'm doing a deal with an agent, I probably like my grandpa probably knows theirs,
exactly.
and there's ties and it really is a tight knit community. So
A lot to be said for that.
Mayor Henry, thank you so much. This really means a lot to me. I didn't tell my mom I was going to do this. She's going to lose her mind. She's going to just lose her mind. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I'm excited to watch your vision unfold, and we really appreciate it.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Jake.